Hello.
It's not called Facebook anymore.
What is it, Meta?
My son told me that Facebook was going to stay Facebook, but Meta is like the company name. I was just asking him that today.
I was thinking,
yeah,
made a big news thing out of it.
Got it.
That's the way the news media is kind of pushing it. That Facebook is going to change their name. And I'm like, I don't really think so.
Yeah.
Whoops. Let me do that. Okay, we're just waiting for her. If you are joining us on Facebook, we are getting ready to Zoom with Suzanne Woods Fisher, and we're discussing her book, which is Backwards, The Moonlight School. And we're very excited to do that. So, we're just waiting for Suzanne. Everybody wave. Hey, why don't you hold up your goodie bags that we can show everybody?
Thank you.
Hold up your goodie bags. Thank you, Suzanne, for sending us these fun totes and some bookmarks. We were very excited to get those. Inside.
Oh, I didn't look.
I've got some for you.
Okay, there it is. Oh, my word. Huh. Here's one on Coastal Breeze, a charming family in need of change offer delicious summer romances. Okay.
Oh, see, there you go.
No, it doesn't look like that. Well, there has been
I read some of
romance
those 5 years ago. They were
But-
good.
What?
These coastal books. It was completely contemporary. It was
Contemporary.
completely different from
Okay.
what.
That's what her hair looks
I think
like.
I just read 2 of them. Though. I don't think I read
No.
the White House one.
You know, it's kind of, yeah, this one is.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love it. Season on the Wind is everything in all this engaging. And I read them. I'm not saying I don't read them. I just don't read them.
Nice, easy reading.
Well, oh, it's just now 7:30.
Yeah,
I actually got on earlier this time.
I love this. It has the names of her books there.
Oh, yeah, she put her books on there.
Mhm. But, I'm glad she put Moonlight on there.
Yeah, the first one, the Moonlight School.
Yeah. Get lit at the library. That's cute.
Cool.
Actually, gonna forget.
No, because she just emailed me.
What?
Maybe if I put my book in here that I'm reading for novels, maybe I wouldn't pour water and coffee on it. There's an idea.
Yes, that's a good thing. Do you?
Little stupid thing.
With every book you get, almost?
The last 3 books.
Oh.
You just have to mark them. These are book club books.
Well, here's the other thing. This book came back to the library and it had been completely saturated in coffee and water and something else. And the note was, if you can't still use this, and I was like,
Excuse me.
I just couldn't tell her. I just don't understand.
I just do them to my own books. I don't.
Oh, no. And I'm not saying, but it's like, that's pretty obvious. I can't use the book. So just say, can I help pay for it or something like that?
Mhm.
But no, we didn't do that. Because we don't have late fees or anything.
Well,
Did you say the next book was based on a true?
yes.
The next one is 2?
The next one is 2. I didn't mean to do that, but it happened. Oh, there she
I
is.
like those.
Admit.
Is that she here?
Yes.
Okay. She
There
is.
she is.
Yeah, I like those covers.
Hello?
How are you, Suzanne?
Is she in our time zone?
I think so.
Where is she
I don't know. I don't remember.
California.
Oh, California. So
No,
no,
she
she's
isn't.
not.
No.
She's 2 hours earlier, so she's at 5:30.
Are you there?
No. Her name, oh,
That's not what I want to do.
Okay, there we go. There
Okay.
we go. It was the recording. It jammed me.
Okay.
Hi. Hi,
Welcome.
everybody. This is the Novel Thinkers.
It is. Let me show you everybody because they all like to hide from the camera, but
Wow, hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. I appreciate it so much. It's probably dark where you are, isn't it?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm getting
just
dark.
getting dark for us.
yes.
Hmm?
Welcome to Kansas.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just getting the presentation kind of put together or brought up. So
Okay,
that's happening.
so share my screen. Is that what I want to do? I forget how
Yeah,
to.
in 1 second. Hang on. I just have to
Okay.
get it up. Okay, good. So, okay, so let's try. And just want to start by thanking you for coming tonight. So I'm going to do, if this sounds good to you, and I'm totally open if you want to change it up, but I have this presentation about the real Moonlight Schools that's kind of fun to see the background of, and it'll last like 15 minutes or so. And then I'll stop sharing the screen and we can go to questions and talk about the book. But I think you might enjoy it. I've really had a good response from it.
Sounds good. I think
Sounds
we
good.
are up for it. Okay. So
She's gonna share the screen.
she has, but I have to give her
Yeah.
permission, I think.
Oh.
Nope. That didn't work.
No,
Okay. Well, I shared my screen. That's not what I want.
no, she's share hers.
No, I'm sharing yours really.
Okay, hold on. Every time we do this, we learn something new.
I know, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You are very fine. So share screen. There we go. One participant, multiple participants. Okay.
She's the only one we're really sharing the screen with them.
Okay.
Does that work?
Well, let's see.
That's my face.
I know
I think that's my screen still.
yeah, it should kind of give me like an acceptance where I accept the screen sharing.
You are screen sharing.
Hmm.
Well, no, that's me trying to share my screen.
Okay, what does that do for you?
Oh,
Oh, there you are.
Ordinary
Did it do it? Okay, okay, good. Okay, awesome. Bethany, you're wonderful. Okay, so then let me just get this, and thanks for everybody's patience. So let me get it just set it up. No.
Mhm.
No, sorry.
That's all right.
There we go. Okay, how's that?
Perfect.
Awesome.
Is that good?
Mhm.
Okay, and the only other thing I'll probably get clumsy about is that sometimes moving it forward can go back and forth. But the content is good. So, okay, so to begin with, we're going to talk about a woman named Cora Wilson Stewart, and that's who you read the book about. I'm Suzanne Woods Fisher, live out in California. Looking forward to this all day. So let's see. Okay, so Cora Wilson Stewart, this is the life about a very sort of an ordinary woman who led a really extraordinary life. And Cora Wilson Stewart was born in 1875 in Rowan County, Kentucky, where the story is set. Her father was a physician and her mother was a teacher. And she was raised in a home that put a high value on education, though it wasn't necessarily what the county was like at the time. She became a teacher. Then she actually ran for the superintendent of education in her county. And keep in mind, she won by an overwhelming landslide. Keep in mind, this is before women had the vote. And this is Appalachia. I mean, it's really kind of amazing, but you're starting to get a sense of what she was like and what kind of drove her. So she was responsible for 51 rural schoolhouses in the greater Rowan County area, as well as the school that was in the town. And she opened up these schoolhouses on moonlit nights, you know the story, hoping that illiterate adults would come down on the mountains to learn how to read and write. She hoped for just 100 to 150 people. And on that first night, just remarkable, to think that 1,200 people came out of the hills and the hollows to learn how to read. Just remarkable story. So that's kind of beginning our story. You might wonder, how did this story come into my life? It's kind of an interesting sort of a little slice of my world. I get up really early in the morning and I try to hit a word count every day. And I listen to a classical radio station as I write. And there was this one morning, this narrator has this beautiful baritone voice. And he said, on this day, and I'm guessing it was September 5th, on this day in history, the Moonlight Schools began with Cora Wilson Stewart. And there was something about that. I don't know, maybe just the poetry of the Moonlight Schools, but I stopped what I was doing and I sort of, Googled it and looked up a little bit more and I couldn't believe I didn't know this story. It was just so remarkable. So I ended up, sorry, I'm always forgetting how to advance, whether you need my mouse. I ended up kind of just following this hunch. Some to the left here are a number of the little schoolhouses that are up in Rowan County. Obviously, the second one is a rendition of the bottom one, which is on the Moorhead State University School now. And these are the kinds of little schools that were up in the mountains that she's had teachers, teaching. And I followed a hunch. I kind of thought, okay, I think there is such a story here. And I learned more and more. And then I ended up, sending it to my editor and having a conversation with it about it. She loved it too. And it wasn't too much later that a contract was in the mail. So just to give you a background of how a story kind of takes place. And this was years ago. So I was contracted for it, but I had a number of contracts, so I couldn't get to it until recently. But anyway, that's how the story took place. So I want to just set the stage. This is Kentucky. The red is Rowan County. And obviously Eastern Appalachia. Something that is different about Rowan County from some of the neighboring counties is that it's not a coal county, it is lumber. And that's very unique among the Kentucky area. It poor subsistence farming. And according to the 1910 census, and this is something I do as a writer when I'm doing a historical fiction, is to go to the census of the time, because you get so much information about what life was like in that time period. So according to 1910, the illiteracy rate in the entire United States was 7.7% of the population. They couldn't read or write in any language. So Kentucky's illiteracy rate at the time was 12.1%. So almost, double that. And then we go to Rowan County, and it was at least 25%, probably closer to a full third of the population where the adults were completely illiterate. And the reason it was probably a higher number was because the very isolated area, and they are not really welcoming federal agents coming to the door, knocking and asking questions, as you can imagine. So something kind of interesting about this time frame is that academics believed adults could not learn to read or write. This was the research of the time. This was the thinking of the time, that there was a window in childhood when the mind was receptive to learning to read and write, and when it closed, it was done. And Cora accepted that. This was how she'd been educated. This is what she assumed was right. Well, and then there were these 3 aha moments that she'd had with the mountain people that really changed her thinking. And I actually wove these into the book, so they might sound a little bit familiar to you. So the first one was a woman named Molly McLaughlin. This is not actually her, but this is sort of what I imagine her to look like. And Molly was an older woman living up in the hills. She would come down to Cora's office in town and ask her she'd either dictate letters to her to write to her daughter Jane, who lived in Chicago, or she would have Cora read letters to her that Jane had written to her. And there came this one day when Molly came in and went into Cora's office, and Cora asked her if she'd come for a letter reading. And Molly said, nope, I've learned to read and write myself, and I'm going to answer Jane's letter by myself. And she had bought herself a speller and stayed up late at the night learning, teaching herself how to spell, read, and write. And her first letter was to her daughter, Jane. Just such a cool story. Well, second incident was, again, this is just a picture, but this involved a mountain man, about a middle-aged fellow. And it happened to several months after Cora's encounter with Molly. This gentleman came into Cora's office needing something. And remember, she grew up here. She knew these people well. And he was waiting for her to finish something at her desk. And she noticed that he was looking at her bookshelf of books. In Rowan County, books were pretty precious. They weren't that common, and it was not unusual for Cora to lend a book out. So she asked if he was interested. He could read a book from her. And he turned to her with tears in his eyes, and he said, "I can't read or write. I would give 20 years of my life if I could." Well, that was another big moment. And then the last one came a little bit after the last incident. And this was with a school function that Cora had attended. And it was a mountain man about 21 years old. And he had just sang the most beautiful ballad, beautiful, at this school function. And after she heard this song and was so touched by the power and the strength of the music, she asked him for a copy of it and told him she thought it was worth publishing and wondered if she could even help him. And he told her he had hundreds of songs like that, but he couldn't write them down because he couldn't read or write. Well, something about those moments just gave Cora this idea of, wait a minute, I think we've got something here with adults learning to read and write. And so she set to work on the idea of the Moonlight Schools. Now, the reason obviously she went to the Moonlight Schools was because these were farmers. They worked hard all day, and probably the only time they were going to be able to come into school would be in the autumn at night, and on big moonlit nights, because it was so dark, so dark, heavily wooded area. Well, I'm going to set this aside for a minute. So Cora's hatching this idea of the Moonlight School, and I just want to pull back in a little bit. How does I had this idea, I had the knowledge of it, I had the basic facts. I'd been reading books about what Cora had done. There's a number of books I can show you later, but how do you take this idea and turn it into 85 to 95,000 words of a novel? And I want to show you how I did it a little bit. So you have the basic facts of Cora, and now I'm moving into how to expand it into a novel. And it was really by learning something new about the times there. And one of the first places I went to was the music, because music is such a rich part of Appalachian tradition. We all love, blues. It's just it's part of our country. And there was something I learned about this that was fascinating, which is these singing school masters that started in New England in the 1700s. And they were kind of like itinerant preachers. They would go in the fall again, just like the Moonlight Schools. They would go from town to town and stay for a while. Someone would host them. And they'd have kind of like a gathering at night where they'd have, or Sunday afternoons, where they'd have a tent gathering, in this case, a brush arbor. And they would teach people songs and how to sing. And the singing school master would stand in the center of, let's say, four sides of benches, and he would sing out a line of a hymn or a song, and then they would repeat it. He would turn, do it again, they'd repeat, do it again. The way he earned his keep was by creating these pamphlets of shape notations, and those of you who are musically minded, you know what they are. But these could be used by illiterate people. They could look at these shapes and understand whether it was held for 4 beats or 2 beats or 1 beat or a quarter note. So it was the way people could all enjoy the gift of music and learn something new and kind of gather together in a time before there was a lot of entertainment. So that was sort of fun, just to understand a little bit about that. Another thing I did, which was fun for me anyway, and I hope it was good, was I used the dialect, learned and studied it. And the problem with using dialect is that especially mountain talk, you can really annoy readers. If you use it too much, you know, that's it irritating. If you don't use it enough, it's really a missed opportunity. But something that's kind of challenging, I think, about mountain talk is that it kind of, there's an assumption that people aren't very smart, that it's sort of an ignorant kind of dialect. Well, you might be really surprised to learn that most of the phrases that are right out of Appalachia go back to 1400 England, the UK, Scotland and Ireland. Geoffrey Chaucer, the probably the most famous English poet there ever was. Many of these phrasing came right out of his work. So, for example, and you might even know a couple of these. You ever heard a friend say afeared, or a mite, a little bit? Book read, if you're educated. Nothing never stop means unending. And then I have to admit, there's some books, some phrases that are just invented right out of thin air, probably like all of our locations, words that are unique to the region. Here's a couple of them. Segoglin. I have a friend from Kentucky who says things aren't like, if a door jamb isn't straight, it's Segoglin. Jasper is a stranger. Gown means all cluttered up. Those are just kind of some of the fun things. I also studied a lot about the food as well. And that was interesting because so much of it comes from Germany, from the UK. Sauerkraut, for example, the fermentation process was alive and well in Kentucky at that time. And it was either sauerkraut or it might have been whiskey, but it tells you so much, just the history of food and what people are eating and why. And it's just rich to study. So, okay, we're moving back to the novel now. Cora's ideas are starting to take shape. She had this idea of the Moonlights, wasn't quite sure how this was going to happen, but she set to work and she created an actual, like a class schedule, Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9, 6 weeks, 2 6-week sessions. She started promptly at 7. And one thing I have to say about Cora, she knew these people. She had a great appreciation for their time, for how tired they were, how hard they worked. Started and ended right on time. 15-minute devotional, including singing, 25 minutes of reading lessons, writing lessons, arithmetic, 2 drills, and away they went. And she also created very relevant reading materials. She did not want to have these tired parents come in, or grandparents, sit at a child's seat and open up a primer or look at primers. She knew that was not going to be successful. I think she understood the pride of these people as well, how humiliating it was for them. So she created books and materials and newspapers. She had something called the Rowan County Messenger. This is what she used at first. And it had a lot of relevant reading material for farming, which is so clever of her, so smart. Short sentences, lots of repetition. Her goal was a functional literacy. So I'm going to kind of go through a couple of slides now that are what she developed later on as Moonlight Schools developed, grew into a larger, well-known kind of activity. But this is the Country Life Readers. And this was just the daily life of adults. Again, she's not trying to have them read child's books. She wrote the Mother's First Book. This was published a little later, all about, everyday tasks for women. She also did something, I think this is really interesting, and this is the Soldier's First Book, because again, 1911 is where my story is set, but the Moonlight Schools really took off. And it wasn't long before we were facing World War I. I think she just has sort of such an understanding of people and what they needed. And she had a sense that young men were going to be in terrible trouble if they couldn't read or write. And if they were in a foreign country, if they were in a boot camp, if they were trying to read instructions of where to go and what to do. And at the time, the US Surgeon General discovered through the reporting that they had 25% of all men registering for the draft couldn't read or write. And she felt it was really terrible dangers ahead for them. So she called on the federal government to offer literacy training, they refused, absolutely refused, which is kind of hard to believe. So she created the Soldier's First book, and she had a special Moonlight Sessions just for draftees. Okay, now I'm going to jump back to 1911. These pupils were able to sign a document with their own name, do basic math, write simple letters, and read a verse of the Bible. This was what she was aiming for. It's hard to imagine what it would be like to sign your name after you've just done an X for all your life. But remarkable ability. They were moving from illiteracy to a functional literacy. And there was this great quote by, I couldn't find who it was. It was an older man, and they never attributed it to anybody, but it said that the Moonlight Schools has taken my community from moonshine and bullets to lemonades and Bibles. Well, in 2 years, so by 1913, adult illiteracy was virtually wiped out in Rowan County. Remember, we had over 1,200 people. And that first night, women with babies, people 85 years old, I think the oldest was 86, came. Adult illiteracy was wiped out. It's just astounding. And not just that, but Moonlight Schools caught on quickly. The immediate success of the program spread to several states, and it became the model for adult literacy education, what we know of now as night school. This was how it started. It was said that within the first 20 years of the program, over 700,000 Kentuckians attended the Moonlight Schools. By 1916, there were 18 states with Moonlight Schools. The greatest success Cora felt was with the African-American populations. And as Cora moved along in her life, she became known for her work with adult literacy and received a lot of recognition. She chaired the NEA Committee on Illiteracy, and she was chair of President Hoover's Commission on Illiteracy. She had this dream to eliminate illiteracy in one generation. And she saw herself giving 10 years to Kentucky and 10 years to the nation and then 10 years to the whole world. And, it didn't quite work out that way. It sort of fell short, but such a remarkable impact that she had. Oh, I'm going to back up a minute. And and I don't mean to make her life sound like it was a straight upward climb, because it wasn't. There was a lot of ups and downs for her and a lot of disappointments. And kind of a sad ending. She went blind in her last few years of life. She died in 1959 at the age of 83 years old. But she gave us something that I think is a gift for all of us. And it's the idea of a dream and starting small and never stopping. So with that, I want to just show you some statistics about illiteracy then and now, literacy, because I was stunned. I was stunned at them. I fully expected, if in 1910, the United States had a 7.7% illiteracy, I fully expected that to be smaller by now. And to my shock, we are at a 21% fall of Americans fall in the illiterate or functionally illiterate category. 14% can't read a newspaper or a medicine label. We rank 7th in global literacy. And I think the prison population is so sad. Well, to back up for a second, you look at children whose parents don't read, there's not going to be books in the house. And the cycle keeps going. The prison population is so concerning. It's 75% of prison inmates are either classified as having low literacy. 3 out of 5 people in prison can't read. 85% of youth offenders struggle to read. So that's what I mean by that cycle that goes on. And I can't say, I'm not an expert on this topic, but I can't say there's one reason for this. you can't just look at immigration or poverty or this. It is bigger than that. But Cora also taught us that it's solvable. This is a solvable problem. And I think there's some things we can kind of do. There's a phrase in literacy called each one teach one. And I just love that because that was Cora's model. She started with what she knew. She started in her town with the people she'd grown up with. She understood them and it grew from there. So as I just kind of finish this presentation, I feel sort of like I just can't say enough about what one by one we can do. And you might be already doing it. Just when you read to your children and your grandchildren, you're doing it. You are showing them the value and the gift of reading. Some other things, volunteering at your public library. I have a couple of friends who volunteer now that our public library is open, and they are working with, one friend is working with an immigrant from mainland China who has an MBA from Beijing University, but struggles with English. And so all she does is work with him on conversational English. A book club like you're doing it. It's, you're reading and talking about it and getting excited about it. I think supporting local teachers. I have 4 kids and I felt like I did a lot to, thank teachers every year. But now that I know more, and now that I have a daughter and a son-in-law who are teachers, I feel like, you can't do enough to just give them what they need or help them or let them know they're appreciated. Another thing, I live in a little town that's unincorporated, and we don't have a public library in our town. So I have a little free library out in front of my house. And I got it about 5-6 years ago, and it's so much fun. I think someone's in it every single day, getting books or putting books, taking books. But it's just one way. I have a street that the kids to junior high ride their bikes on, and they're just seeing it. They're seeing, the value of reading. So anyway, I just love the idea of just keeping going and keeping going. And last thing, there's a couple of books that are set in Appalachia that you might have read with your book club. I think I have them in my bookshelves. Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes and The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. And if you haven't read them and if you liked Moonlight Schools, please do read them. They're wonderful stories that take place in the 1930s with the FDA, or the WPA, Works Progress Administration, where these librarians are sent up on pack horses to go bring books to the people up in the mountains. And when I've read them and I loved them. And I thought about the fact that 30 years earlier, when Cora was there was no one reading up in the mountains, that her work really opened that door, that there were people up there reading. And I just thought, oh, Cora, look what you did. I mean, just kind of a wonderful little sign of her impact. So with that, I will now stop sharing the screen and pass it back. There, how's that?
Perfect.
Could you give me the names of those books again?
Yeah, one is called The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek.
Okay.
Really interesting.
Are they fiction or fiction?
They're fiction. They're just fiction.
Okay.
But the pack librarians are true. That's a neat story.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And the other one is Giver of Stars.
Okay, thanks.
And that's Jojo Moyes. And I think I have the Bookwoman right over there. But anyway.
Thank you for sharing that. That was very interesting.
My pleasure.
A lot of research and preparation for this. That must have taken a long time you did a good job.
Oh, thank you. I always feel like I stumble a lot, but I love the story of it. I love that Cora Wilson Stewart's interest in helping people was for the common good. It wasn't just to become well known. She just had such a drive. I didn't mention one thing, and you might have read it in the notes in the book, but she also, curiously, in 1911, she'd also been divorced 3 times, twice to the same man. I mean, she was a woman really ahead of her time, and yet, and tragic marriages. I think there was abuse and there was alcoholism, and she just threw her passions into her work. That was what she was all about. And I find it so interesting that in 1911, in a really conservative place, she was not frowned upon. She was not, she was loved. She was really a well-regarded, highly respected woman. And I just find it so interesting. She's just a strong, independent woman. I wish we were studying her on, April is Women's History Month. I wish she was one of our women.
Well, thank you for these bags.
Oh, yes.
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, good. They're the 3 books I've written that I've released this year. That was with
Oh.
the bindings. Good, thank you. I'm glad you got them.
3 books in 1 year. That's very prolific. How do you do
Oh,
that?
no, that's why I'm at the computer a lot. Yeah,
What she said
that's a lot.
on her computer.
And it's not just like you send it off. It comes back to you for proofs and galleys, and you're working on promotion and marketing. And I think half the job is marketing and promotion.
So you write every single day, or I mean,
Yeah,
5 days a week?
Yeah, I do. Even Saturdays. Yeah, I do. I love it. I really love it. I feel very thankful to have the opportunity to write and bring stories to life.
And how many books have you had published? Do you know?
I think I'm in the 30s, like 35, but I don't know exactly right now. And it's kind of mind blowing to think that, because I always feel sometimes like an empty well at the end of a manuscript as it's ready to send in. And then you kind of rest up a little bit, and then something happens, like I heard the Moonlight School, that morning on the classical radio station. And I just get all charged up again.
How did you get started writing?
Well, I wrote as a magazine writer for years when I was raising a family, as a freelancer for a number of different magazines. And I really enjoyed the skills of nonfiction work, where you're doing research, you're calling experts, you're talking to people who have, experience in different things. And I kind of assumed I'd always be a nonfiction writer. I never, ever really thought of myself as a storyteller. And then, and we'd even been living overseas. We were in Hong Kong for 4 years, and the internet was kind of young, and I was able to keep writing from there. And we returned from Hong Kong. And 4 years is a long time with kids too, because I felt like I sort of missed a stage of development in, all of a sudden I came back and these kids were driving, and then my kids are starting to head out to college. And my dad was showing signs of Alzheimer's, which eventually took his life. And there was just a lot of like kind of changes in life. And I remember just thinking, okay, what am I going to do? Do I want to keep doing research and writing nonfiction, or just had this idea about a little story. So I didn't tell anybody. I wrote and wrote and wrote in my laundry room, where I'm sitting right now. I'm in the laundry room. And I didn't even tell my husband. I didn't tell my sister. I just wanted it to be sort of a private, let me see if I can do this. And at the end of that, it was probably 4 months of writing. I sat at the dinner table and I said, I have written a book. And as you know how sons are so sensitive, my son actually said, "That's why there's no food in this house." And he was right. He was actually right. I think I'm not a big shopper, but my Visa bill was down almost nothing. But and that took then pitching it and trying to get it sold, and I ended up at a little small royalty press, which was perfect for me to be, not even a big fish, but a medium fish in a little pond where I could just make mistakes and learn how to, give talks and get public speaking and all that. And even just the hard work of promoting your own work. And an agent, that little book won some awards. An agent connected with me, and then she passed me to a larger publishing house. And that's where I've been ever since, with this one publishing house, which is a blessing. And most people aren't like that. Most people have a number of different publishing houses that they write for. So it's been kind of fun. Wonderful, in fact. I'm really thankful.
Very good.
The story element where Lucy at a very young age is responsible for her little 2-year-old sisters, and then the child was kidnapped. Was there a particular incident that provoked or made you think of that?
Well, that's a great question. So the reason I used Lucy and I used that sort of horror of her daughter, of her little sister disappearing, because there's Cora's story. The more I dug into it, and I was going to tell you these books I've got about her life, and a lot of them are, that's at Each One Teach One. A lot of they are PhD. This is what the dissertation, what people have done, and so as they wrote about her, and the thing that's kind of interesting is that there wasn't much pushback for her. There wasn't. It kind of fell into place pretty easily, the Moonlight Schools, which is wonderful, but it's not a story. I needed conflict. I needed to create a reason that you're kind of going to what happens next, because that's the whole point of a story. So I brought Lucy in also because every story needs a love story. Yeah, almost every story has a love story, except for maybe To Kill a Mockingbird. But really, that was, most every war stories, everything has a love story. And I really didn't want to mess with Cora's life. I understood her marriage issues. I just felt like I want to represent her for who, as best as I could, for who she was. But I needed somebody there. And so Lucy became the vehicle, one, a love story, two, the conflict with her little sister. Like, where is that little sister? Where is she gone? And then three, she was an outsider. So you can start to see Appalachia and Rowan County through her eyes. And yes, she was from Kentucky, but I mean, a whole nother socioeconomic group. And for her to come in with her preconceived biases, with her shock at Molly's dirt floor, at chickens inside of a house, of, the poverty of lice in the hair, of the way people lived, and yet also to start to change and to see beyond that, to the beautiful parts of Appalachia, the families and the faith and how they cared for each other. And that was part of what Lucy was all about. She was my vehicle. She was my, she really made the story go. I feel like if someone had taken this story like I heard at that classical music station and given it to 5 authors and said, come back in a year with a story, I think you'd have 5 different stories. You could go in so many different directions. I made the decision to even end it on the very first night, simply because I just see the drama of it. I could just feel the sense of a dark night with a big moon, round and creamy, and through these hills and these tall trees, you hear the horse, and then you see the people coming. And I felt like that just to me was the best way to end it, where you were right there on the cusp and seeing what was going to happen, even though someone else could have taken it for 2 more years, and to see how their lives have changed and what reading did for people. And that could be a fun thing to carry on with someday.
So are you writing another book?
Yes, I am. Not in this series. Though. This was a standalone. Yeah, this was a standalone. But I have a book, just came out a couple weeks ago, and it's actually called A Season on the Wind, about the Audubon Christmas bird count. And a little rare bird ends up on an Amish farm, and everyone runs to the farm to try to count this bird. And it's a bird that's rarely sighted in North America. And then in the spring, I have a book called The Sweet Life, totally different. And it's about women's contemporary fiction. A mother and a daughter start an ice cream shop on Cape Cod. And how the relationship with mothers and daughters can get complicated, and this does. But here's something kind of fun. My husband is a ice cream maker, a true ice cream maker. He went to Penn State for ice cream school. Did you know there was such a thing? Have any of you heard of it?
Nope.
In January, Penn State has ice cream school, and all the greats have gone. Baskin and Robbins, Ben and Jerry's, Denny's, you name it, probably all your favorites. And it's held, they have like a 2-week session for true business people, and they have a short-term one for like serious hobbyists. And that's what my husband is. So my editor has known this. She's been to my home and has loved Steve's ice cream. And just to give you a little side note, my husband is a serious guy and he's serious about ice cream. So we call it Steve's Serious Ice Cream. And he has made vanilla 59 times. Vanilla is the hardest flavor to get right. It can't be masked by stronger flavors like chocolate or coffee. So it's really hard to get vanilla right. It's also the most popular flavor in the world, but he worked that hard to get it just right. So anyway, my editor said, I want an ice cream story. And I just thought, okay, you want it, you got it. So that's coming soon. That's going to be exciting. I just went through the galleys. Great cover. It's just bright pink with ice cream. It's very visually appealing.
And it's coming out this spring.
It's coming out in the spring. Yeah, in April, late April, early May.
What was the name again?
The Sweet Life.
Oh, The Sweet Life. Okay.
Yeah. I think you'd like it if, just for a summer read.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. This was fascinating to hear. We all love the story. So,
well, I appreciate, thank you. But, I appreciate what you're doing too. You're reading, and I'd love to know what other books you're reading right now. I think it's fun to just pop into your world and see what you're doing. And are most of you teachers, by the way? Are a lot of you teachers?
Nope.
Or retired? A lot of book clubs I've done, and teachers love books.
well, this is our next month's book by Amy
Okay.
Green, her newest one. And let's see, we just read all over
All over the place.
all over the place. Yep.
Do you?
Mhm.
I'm in a book club too. Have you read The Personal Librarian?
No.
About J.P. Morgan's librarian? That you might enjoy that.
Personal librarian.
We do all Christian fiction because
Okay,
so
so it's secular, but it's a good book. But
yeah, sounds like it.
The personal.
Personal librarian.
Okay.
Yes.
well, you might like Lynn Austin's Wonderland Creek. That too is a pack horse librarian.
Okay. Yeah, we did one of her books, Chasing Shadows. Is that what we did? I think
Yes.
we did Chasing Shadows a few months ago. So we'll have to check that one out.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Take care, everybody. Have good holidays coming up.
Thank you very much.
I got that.
Bye-bye.
Something pack horse.
I've read that.